I stole from my room. Yeah, because my mom has a horrible taste in pie.
My name is Ryan Schmidt, head of Solheim Media. We just finished setting up, and before the rest of the crew gets back in here, I just want to mention a few things about this series. This will be the most extensive video series ever produced on the assassination of JFK. The host is a New York Times best-selling author and has written 2 books covering the assassination of JFK. Craig Zerbel. We hope you enjoy the series, The Final Chapter on JFK.
The Final Chapter on JFK. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Segment 1, Introduction.
The goal of this series will be to use reason and common sense to look at undisputed evidence, attempting to reach a logical conclusion in President Kennedy's death. And if we're going to start with that, one of the things we might want to do is look at the series title card, The Final Chapter on JFK. We have a photograph here, and that is actually of Warren Commission Exhibit 889. That was taken by the FBI approximately a month after Kennedy's death. And what they were doing is they were reenacting the last part of the motorcade route, and they were filming it from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, the location where Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly was at and where he supposedly killed Kennedy. They were using a rifle scope built into a camera, and they were taking photographs of the route as Kennedy would have been going on it. If you look at 889, you will notice that there is a figure in the trees. By all logical counts, everyone would have to agree that no one would ever fire through trees trying to hit a target. Doesn't make sense. And you wouldn't try and hit a target if it was obstructed by trees or something else, and then trying to follow that target out when it's coming into an open space. It's hard to do. Especially if for a block and a half before you get to Exhibit 889, the trees, it's completely open. Most people with reason and common sense would agree that if you wanted to shoot at a target and you had the choice between an obstruction like trees or a clear and open view, you would take the open view. For a block and a half before that, there was a clear view of the target with nothing in the way. And in fact, not only was there a clear view for a block and a half, but the limousine turned right in front of the Texas School Book Depository, right at the alleged assassination site. And at that point in time, with a clear view, the limousine was moving at approximately 2 miles an hour. Old man walking speed. If anyone was in the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, you couldn't have missed that shot. And in fact, most people would agree that you could have taken a book from the Texas School Book Depository and thrown it out the window, and it would have hit the limousine. So, as we start this series, let's remember from now, throughout the entire duration of this series, through the rest of your life, every time they talk about Kennedy and the assassination and Lee Harvey Oswald, keep remembering Exhibit 889, firing through trees, versus a clear view. Most people wouldn't go that way. Now, with that as a base, let's simplify the entire assassination into just one short little paragraph. And we have it up over here. And the paragraph is as follows. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated Friday, November 22nd, 1963 at 12:30 p.m. That same afternoon, Vice President Johnson went to the airport, transferred his own luggage to the president's plane, put the dead president and the widow in the back, took his oath of office, and then flew back to Washington. The alleged assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, without a motive, was arrested, charged, and then executed on national television while in police custody before an audience of millions. On Sunday, shortly thereafter, Texas officials in charge of investigating the assassination declared the case closed. The following day, the president was buried and America had a new leader, a bitter enemy of the former president, sitting in the Oval Office waiting to go to work. In any country of the world except America, this event would have been viewed suspiciously as a bloody coup. That was from my first paragraph, from my first chapter, from my first book on the Kennedy assassination. And if you feel, sense, or believe that something just wasn't right about the Kennedy assassination, you're like about 95% of all people. And of course, with doubts and questions, Pandora's box opens up and no one knows what will come out and what path it will ultimately end up on. This series is intended to cover almost every rational topic on the John F. Kennedy assassination. It begins with giving you the tools to look at any JFK assassination conspiracy claim and to determine if it is even worth your time investigating or reading about it. It then proceeds to evaluate almost all assassination claims and then starts looking at the murder with an objective eye. And although probably 95% of what you hear, read, or see about the Kennedy assassination is merely recycled, and by the way, in my lifetime, some of the stuff has been recycled 3 or 4 times just to a new generation, since there isn't a lot of new material coming out. In this series, you will hear and learn things that have not been regularly discussed or even ever evaluated. For instance, here are some points that this series will examine. Kennedy's alleged killer, Lee Harvey Oswald, not only didn't have a motive, but he actually admired JFK. And he told the press during jail transfers as he was going from a cell to an interrogation room, he kept calling out that he was a patsy. And this was while he was in police custody. And before he was killed, he tried to retain a famous lawyer who was well known for representing defendants who had been charged with conspiracies against the United States government. You'll also learn that Kennedy's successor, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, not only was part of the planning team for JFK's trip, but he was extremely hostile against his leader JFK and Kennedy's brother. And on the day of Kennedy's death, if you can believe it, a huge news article was released in a magazine across the nation. And it involved Johnson and a scandal. This one called the Bobby Baker scandal. Johnson at the time, although historians have been trying to push it out of the way, was involved in 3 national scandals: the Bobby Baker scandal, the Billy Saul Estes scandal, and the TFX airplane scandal. And it led to the resignation of Johnson's one and only appointee that he had as a vice president, Fred Korth, in October of '63, just before Kennedy was killed. Johnson's appointee had to resign, or he would have been impeached. All 3 of these scandals in themselves would have destroyed Johnson politically, and most likely would have led to him either being impeached, jailed, or both. But for a few ounces of lead, John F. Kennedy's successor continued unscathed by the scandals, and he actually patted them down and wiped them out when he achieved the presidency. We're also going to examine the Red Plot, a strategy used to federally seize all of the evidence in the case, even though it wasn't legal, and to self-create a commission to perform one and only one function, and that was not a criminal investigation into Kennedy's death. Further, you're going to hear about Ballot Box 13, which was a 1940 strategy used by Lyndon Johnson and his lawyer again in the 1960s on the Kennedy evidence, and Johnson used the exact same lawyer that he used with Ballot Box 13. We're going to evaluate a number of claims by examining excuses made by Johnson, for example, not evaluating, but in fact destroying the major crime scene in the case, President Kennedy's limo. And we will learn that both the FBI and the Warren Commission knew that the alleged assassination rifle was part of a defective lot, and they had to use a substitute rifle for all of their tests. And we'll do some test firing on a Lincoln Continental windshield and frame to evaluate two claims relating to whether bullets hit the windshield or the frame on the windshield. We will also determine the most likely way the alleged assassination rifle got into the Texas School Book Depository, and how both the FBI and the Warren Commission knew or should have known those same facts, but they never followed up on it, or if they did, they didn't disclose it to us. And we will also look at whether the alleged murder weapon ever had an ammo clip. You are going to see how the FBI unwittingly agrees with me. This series will continue on from there, and we will track those likely involved and examine the rewards that they ultimately obtained. And I can tell you that some of the rewards were tremendous. While there are no guarantees in life, love, or law, I'll guarantee you this. If you watch this entire series, you will know more about the assassination than all 7 members of the President's Warren Commission who were placed in charge of investigating the crime and reaching a conclusion. You will know more than all of those members combined. Now, with that said, with full disclosure, I might have to tell you that one of those members only attended 5 out of 51 sessions. And another one was only committed to attending 16 out of the 51 sessions. So, truthfully, watching a little bit of this series might give you more information than most of these guys ever had. Hope to see you in the next segment.